Is this their Brexit?
So right now, my portfolio is in the absolute mud. I don't think it's going to have the intended consequences of bringing manufacturing back to the US. Dave Chappelle said it like, we want to wear Nikes. We don't want to make Nikes.
Bruv came in with like all the big promises. I'm going to negotiate a ceasefire between Palestine and Israel. I'm going to negotiate the end of the war in Ukraine. Waiting for the updates on that.
Yo, everyone, welcome back. Brand new Techish in the building. It is me, Michael Bahane, and I'm joined with
Abadesi of Hustle Crew. Let's do this.
Let's do this. So right now, my portfolio is in the absolute mud. How is your portfolio looking right now, Abadesi? Or have you not looked?
I'm afraid to look. Although I saw things are bouncing back as of yesterday. We're recording this on the 11th of April. But that first tariff announcement sent them plummeting, and I was just sad. Looking at my retirement fund, was not happy at all.
So this all started because of Liberation Day. So Trump announced this concept called Liberation Day, where he was doing widespread tariffs on multiple countries with a formula that was very, very opaque in terms of like why he was doing certain numbers on certain countries. And everyone was convinced, or at least he was trying to convince everyone, that this is permanent, there's no negotiation. But obviously, knowing Trump, you know, he's about as stable as something very unstable. So eventually,
as
he
a
managed
stable
to
coin.
change those numbers. Yeah, he's as stable as a stable coin. He managed to change those numbers to make it 10% across the board for all countries except for China, basically. And it seems like the markets have slightly recovered based on that news. And maybe they had priced in that there would be tariffs on China. But I think it looks like we're not out of the waters just yet, because essentially we're in a trade war where China keeps upping the tariffs on the US and vice versa. What was your thoughts about this whole shenanigans going down? Like, do you think we are out of the woods, the danger zone, portfolio-wise, or just economy-wise?
I feel like it's a very like high-stakes negotiation tactic. I was trying to remember how much debt China holds against the US, and it's an obscene number, like 700 billion or something. Actually, I should fact check that. But, you know, Trump is playing this sort of like high-stakes negotiation game, and then it's having so many impacts across the ecosystem. I mean, I'm just thinking of founders whose runway was like immediately like halved or quartered as a result of these decisions. And it's already been such a bad climate in terms of trying to fundraise, in terms of trying to, you know, launch in new markets. Like all the rising costs have been affecting people in so many ways. People are also doing more with less. They've had to restructure. They had layoffs. Teams are smaller. To then dump tariffs on people. I mean, think of what, you know, product founders especially are like going through right now. So unnecessary, stressful, and all for what? So that you can like bring people to the White House and like negotiate lower tariffs. Yeah, I don't know. I think with the China dynamic, there's an ulterior motive for sure, right? Like it's going beyond the tariffs. I think he wants to try and make a win on negotiating that debt, and you know, have a legacy. He's focused on legacy now. I mean, the guy's like 170 something years old. How many more presidencies does he have in him? How many more years on the planet does he have left in him? I think he's just got this like go big or go home attitude. Unfortunately, it echoes in the wider world. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, you mentioned founders. There are people out here who have imported, you know, $100,000 of stock from their small business, and like it's going to arrive on shore and they're going to get whacked with, you know, 104% or 140%, whatever the number is, like tariff tax. And that's basically probably putting them out of business. Apparently, Apple has done something where they're flying in iPhones on jumbo jets to avoid the tariff tax. So I saw a funny tweet where somebody was talking about how, you know, when you do these job interviews and they hit you with the riddles of like, how many iPhones can fit in a jumbo jet? And it's like, oh, it actually worked out where you need to know this stuff. Like, so I hate those riddles, by the way, in interviews. But yeah, so it's really messing things up for small business. It's going to mess things up for the consumer. Obviously, you know, it's going to be a price increase for the consumer in the US, and that's inflationary. And we want to pretend that this is about the national good, but really, truly, it's going to be the poor and working class and the middle class that's going to feel the pinch the most.
Of course.
Are tariffs in principle a horrible, horrible idea? No, I think tariffs can be used well if they're strategic, if they're basically a scalpel where you're like, okay, we want to protect these certain industries because these are the industries of the future, or we want to make sure that we produce pharmaceuticals, stuff that is strategic. But across the board tariffs to every country, across all industries, I think it's a recipe for disaster, to be honest. One of my favorite books is about...
Go on.
It's called Bad Samaritans. It's an economics book, and it's about how like poor countries developed using tariffs. Even the US did, where they would protect certain infant industries, basically industries that are just coming up. Just like you would protect your child. You wouldn't tell your child, go into the economy and work. You tell them, no, we're going to protect you, get an education, develop you up, and tariffs would do that for these infinite industries. But what they're trying to do now is like your 45-year-old, 50-year-old son and put a tariff to protect him. Is like, I don't think that's what's going to make the US richer. I don't think it's going to have the intended consequences of bringing manufacturing back to the US and, you know, the good old days. And, you know, Dave Chappelle said it, like, we want to wear Nikes. We don't want to make Nikes. That's what he said in one of his stand-ups. And I think it's true. Like, do you think people are really clamoring for like a job in a factory making Nikes? I think people say we need to bring manufacturing back, but okay, but then who wants a manufacturing job? And are people going to really sit there and be like, yes, me, I want that. That's what I'm after.
Was that inspired by the Chinese meme you saw going around on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, it's a reality, isn't it? I mean, I think it's a bit harsh. There are people who obviously are going to want to do that work and, you know, would enjoy that kind of work. But at the same time, let's not pretend that there's, you know, the masses of people are ready for that kind of work. I don't think so. And I think it's like they're just lusting after a golden age that no longer exists. You want to go back to this 50s, 60s era where like a high school student could just drop out with no qualifications, no skills, walk into a factory, get on the equivalent of $60,000, $70,000 a year. And I don't see it coming back. I think it's a fantasy.
Is this their Brexit, right? Because if you think about it, we voted to leave the EU. We were like, F this.
Well, not we.
I mean, I didn't, right? I'm using the collective we of like the UK.
No, don't do that.
Come for me. But as in, like, in theory, through the democratic process, the majority of voters here in the UK voted to leave the European Union, the economic union. And we've been feeling the repercussions since. And there are still things that aren't worked out, like the borders in Ireland and what else. And now Trump comes in and he says, yeah, we're putting all our tariffs up, the highest rates that we've seen since pre-Second World War. And is this just another nail in the coffin of globalization?
I mean, we have to be honest about globalization. Was it a win for everybody? No, it wasn't. Obviously, people in developing countries got, you know, good jobs or relatively good jobs compared to what they were getting before. Obviously, there's this whole sweatshop, you know, labor, but essentially folks got richer in China, in India, and to a certain extent, it was at the expense of, you know, lower to middle class jobs in the US, in the UK. Those jobs got outsourced and those factories left. Rich business owners were greedy and wanted that lower cost labor. So globalization has its benefits, but obviously had its downside. But I feel like it's now too late to try to reverse it in this sort of kind of imprecise one-shot way where it's just not going to work. I don't think. I'm not an economist, but I don't see it reversing 40 years of globalization with one policy. And then imagine now you're a business owner and let's say you're super rich and you want to build a factory in the US, right? Do you think these tariffs are going to hold for 4 years? How can you make those sort of long-term planning? Like, you can't. It's insane. Like, one, Trump is someone who's very capricious and will just go back and do a U-turn, which he's already done. So yeah, that's gone out the window. Two, like, Trump's not going to be in power forever. I know he thinks he will. So that's another thing. So this whole thing of like trying to bring back manufacturing, it's a fallacy. And then, is it the US Brexit? It is to a certain extent, because Brexit was a response to changing times and people trying to go back to a nostalgic era that just does not and will not exist, basically. So this is what I see. It's a spasm of like, we need to go back. And it's like, we can't go back in the exact ways, but there are policies that can help, you know, recreate the middle class, recreate and bolster the working class. Like, but I don't think this is it. The other thing is, one last thing. I think this also potentially is a ploy to try to generate government revenue and then try to do tax cuts for the rich. So I think what they're going to try and do is say like, oh, we've got all this revenue coming in. Now we can do tax cuts for the rich. And why that's so insidious is because this is a regressive form of tax, because it's going to impact the lowest earners the most, because it's a consumption tax basically, which makes up a bigger proportion of their income. And then you're going to hit the rich who are earning, you know, 500K a year to like $10 billion a year. And they're going to get a tax cut. Like, make it make sense. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's what the game plan is all along. So that's just
Do you think he's exploiting? Do you think he's exploiting general knowledge of basic finance and economics a little bit, right? Because even in the rhetoric, even in the narrative, he has said that the countries who are being taxed are going to pay the tariffs, but that's not true, right? The importers pay the tariffs, right? So 100%. It's like the Apples bringing in the iPhones from China that pay the tariffs. And of course, how do companies cover their costs? You don't need to be a founder to know. You pass that on to your customer. So the real people paying the tariffs are the individuals who are buying goods on Amazon, in the shops, on the high street. Yeah, so to your point, if this does end up being, oh, look at all this money that the government's made through tariffs and imported goods, we can now do tax cuts. It's like this weird messed up system where
Yeah.
middle and low income people are subsidizing tax cuts for the wealthiest people, which is dark.
I don't know if he's exploiting economic ignorance. I'm not sure even he understands. That's the thing. I think we are in emperor's new clothes where I don't think Trump fully understands what you just said. And then also I feel like he's surrounded by sycophants who are not willing to tell him, basically. So
I think
if
he
you look
knows,
at,
and he just says it in a way that people buy
I'm not
it.
sure. I'm not sure. I don't think the IQ is there. I'll be honest with you. He is surrounded by sycophants. He's also surrounded by cheerleaders like, you know, a Bill Ackman, like a Chamath, like a David Sachs, who are not willing to tell him the economic truth, which is that, listen, this is economically illiterate. But, you know, the big boss man can't be told the truth, right? The other thing is, this is the thing that's going to happen. That's going to be so insidious. Yeah. Imagine now you're a business that is not affected by the tariffs. So but all your competition has gone up in price by 140%. Let's say, right? As a business owner, you would be remiss not to also increase your price, because you wouldn't do it by 104%, but you might do it by 40% or 50%, because you will still be a hell of a lot cheaper. So when people think, oh, if you're made in America, you'll be fine. No, listen, made in America is going to get more pricey as well, because they know that they have a bigger margin to play with now. So yeah, this is going to be painful. I think China won't back down. That's my other thinking. China's not going to back down. I think people don't understand the psychology of other countries, and I don't understand it fully, but the limited reading that I've done about the kind of psychology and philosophy of the Chinese government over the last kind of 100 years is they have this concept called the century of humiliation, where they felt like the Middle Kingdom, which is how China is pronounced in Chinese, was the center of the world. Then there was European upstarts who colonized them, took their land, Hong Kong,
these
embarrassed them.
Imperialist monsters.
Yeah. They were embarrassed by Japan in the war as well, for example, from their perspective. So to them, they have this concept called the century of humiliation, and they almost have this whole never again. So they're willing to go to the mats. They're willing to, I don't think they're going to ever back down ever again, because they're like, listen, we're not the China of the last 100 years. We are now powerful again, as we were historically, and we can weather the storm. Our population, it's not necessarily, doesn't have the same mechanisms as the US people does to kind of change their government or protest or whatever. So they can actually kind of enforce laws and say, listen, we've got to take the pain, and nothing's really going to happen to them. You know what I mean? Whereas the US government has, you know, the bond market, the stock market, it has elections, it has, you know, the press that might go against the government quite easily. So it's like, you can't win, I don't think, personally, because they, you know, there's different ways that your population can punish you, and I think the US is more weaker in that regard. The US population will backlash and revolt if anything, you know, if things become too uncomfortable for them, which I don't believe would happen in China to the same degree. So yeah, that's why I think he hasn't calculated it correctly. I think he doesn't understand his opponent at all.
No,
and that's where ignorance can hurt you.
I just read a really good book about China, actually. I got it from my local library. I'm going to show it to people in case they're curious. It's called Sweetheart, Sour Heart by Jenny Zhang. And it's like the story of different Chinese people that moved to New York in the 90s, and their stories of their previous generations going through like Mao's Cultural Revolution and collectivization and kind of living between two worlds in like China and the US. And yeah, it gave me some really interesting insight into that experience. One of the last things I want to say about Trump is, Bruv came in with like all the big promises. I'm going to negotiate a ceasefire between Palestine and Israel. I'm going to negotiate the end of the war in Ukraine. Waiting for the updates on that. And now all we're talking about is tariffs. And I was like, you came in talking the big talk about your prowess as a geopolitical, you know, negotiator, diplomat. Where are the results? Where are your first 90 days of winning the Nobel Peace Prize or something? Where are the results? I didn't watch the clip, but Obama, maybe I shouldn't quote this in case it was like AI generated, but I just saw this like still on social media when I was scrolling. It was Obama, and the quote was like, imagine if I had done this.
Yeah, it was real. That was real.
Like, imagine if I had done any of this.
Because I think there was even one time when Trump banned certain press publications from the White House because they had done negative stories about him. So, yeah, exactly. So Obama was like, yo, imagine if I had banned Fox News, like, how would they respond to me? Like, and he's right. Trump is Teflon Don. He is like on any other elected leader I've seen in my lifetime, in the sense that he's able to do some of the most foolish, corrupt policies in broad daylight. It doesn't affect him. Like, even, for example, he came out on Truth Social and was like, yo, it's a good time to buy, just before he announced the pause on tariffs. And there was a bunch of frenzy of like people buying the market and doing option trading just 10 minutes before he announced. So literally, these are obviously White House insiders who knew 10 minutes before, now's the time to buy. In any other industry, any other leader in historically going back would have been crucified. You're done. That's enough to be impeached. How dare you? That's so corrupt. But he gets away with it. And
I
it's
have
not
a
a
new
good
working
sign.
theory. I mean, it's not new, but it's worth reminding. You know, when people are like cancel culture, I don't want to be cancelled, blah, blah, blah. I've just realized if you're a white man, you can't be cancelled, right? You just can't. There's nothing you can do that you won't be Tefloned back into existence. And I was thinking, like, the ultimate example of that is the fact that Hitler, right, did unspeakable crimes against humanity. And there are still people that are idolizing him today.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, right?
And it's crazy because in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, people will probably idolize Trump. Because if you're a white man, you just can't be cancelled, no matter what you do.
I mean, I wouldn't say those two figures are exactly alike, but I understand what you're saying. There's definitely always going to be a contingent of people who are riding for, you know, big white daddy. But what I was going to say is that one thing that's special about Trump in that regard is that he has basically created a new form of response to controversy, which is basically just deny it, lie, never apologize. And I feel like those of us on the left, we're so keen to be likable and to do what's right sometimes that if we do have mistakes and we do mistakes, we're like, I'm sorry, I'm going to go disappear for a while, I'm going to go think about it. And rightfully so, probably. But Trump don't do that. He doesn't ever back down. He will never acknowledge a mistake. And to be honest, it works because people respect, when I say people, the system has a flaw in it where if you just bulldoze your way through it, you cannot be stopped. So, for example, there was one person, I think there was someone in the Trump administration who acknowledged the fact that they mistakenly sent somebody to El Salvador. It was a mistake, basically. They sent the wrong person because they've got a new system where they're sending certain illegal immigrants to El Salvador, right? Which is obviously inhumane. But this is the case. And the person who acknowledged there was a mistake got fired. The person who said, we made a mistake. They're no longer working in the White House because the White House is like, we don't acknowledge our mistakes. We keep it pushing. And this is a new phenomenon that I haven't seen in the US, where if Bill Clinton got caught getting a blowjob in the Oval Office, it was embarrassing. There was people trying to impeach him. Fair enough, he didn't get deposed, but there was still some consequences. With Trump, it's just like, I'm keeping it pushing, and you can't keep up because there's another controversy
tomorrow. But the landscape
tomorrow.
is different now because I don't think other people could necessarily get away with it, right? Like the media plays like a huge role in like setting the agenda of what we talk about and holding people to account, right? So I also think there's a reality where if Kamala made a mistake as vice president and didn't own up to it, I think people would be gunning for her, like forcing her to comment or say something. And I don't think that pressure or accountability falls on him in the same way. Or if it does, there's an equal measure of press and media that's shifting the narrative onto the next story already and not forcing him to do that. That's already talking about his next accomplishments and his next accolades. You know what I mean? Like there's a press machine that's allowing him to brush over the mistakes and keep moving forward and deny and deny and deny. So it's not just that he's doing it, it's also that there's an infrastructure around him that allows him to do that.
Because I think he knows how to manipulate the media.
Not to mention like figureheads, like not to mention other like high profile influential authority figures, Elon Musk or whoever else in the ecosystem, who are also just echoing what he's saying or shifting the narrative, moving away from these points of accountability. I don't know. I think he reminds me a bit of Berlusconi. I mean, they're the same shade of orange, first of all. They like the ladies. And I think there's like a similar vibe, a similar energy in
100%.
terms of like how they lead and how they move. And also, let's face it, how they're loved. Yeah.
It's ironic because Elon seems to be on the outs now because Elon doesn't seem to be pro these tariffs. Obviously, it's going to affect him. Anyone who has a business, you know,
and the way that Tesla share price plummeting faster than a comet towards Earth's gravity force. Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, to people listening, and if you're panicked about your investments, just to make it a bit more tangible and actionable, this is not financial advice, but yeah, don't panic. Don't make any rash decisions. If you are investing, you should be investing for the long haul. Really and truly, you should be thinking about putting your money away and not looking at it for like 10, 15 years, really and truly. And you should be making your investments based on those decisions. If you're buying stocks that you need to check daily, then I think you're doing it wrong from my perspective. And I know people who have, you know, went ahead and sold and taken losses. And I've tried to explain to them, historically, the data is not favorable for doing that. You're better off just being patient, especially if you bought diversified index funds. Buying individual stocks is another thing. I don't tend to recommend it unless you seriously know what you're doing and you understand these companies and their long-term prospects. So yeah, that's that.
Hey everyone, it's Abadesi from Techish. Are you a founder promoting a product or a service? Are you recruiting in your team? Well, guess what? You can now advertise on Techish podcast with promo slots starting from as little as $500 per episode. Get in touch at techishpod@gmail.com. That's techishpod, all one word, @gmail.com to learn more.
On a more, is this a light-hearted story? You wanted to talk
It's
about Charlie
hilarious.
Jarvis. So let me give the backstory. So Charlie Jarvis was the founder of a company called Frank. It was a startup, and I think it was a platform to help folks with their student loans in the US, either to kind of like, it was some sort of software to do with student loans. It got acquired by JP Morgan for in the range of like $100-200 million. Essentially, it has now been uncovered. She's been found guilty of it, that she fraudulently created a bunch of users that weren't real in order to kind of inflate the value of her company. JP Morgan bought this asset. They tried to send out an email blast, and they realized that 80% of the list bounced back because they were not real users. So she's been found guilty, actually, and I don't know why she decided to take it to court. I don't know why these people don't decide to just take a plea deal when you know you've done it. But what's happened to her? What's the latest development that you know that made you laugh so much?
So the latest. God, this is so funny. So because she's been convicted of, I can't. She's been convicted of defrauding JP Morgan Chase of $175 million. And as we've said on this podcast before, if you're going to screw over anyone, don't make it rich white men. They will come for you. Don't be scamming people with good lawyers and, you know, access to the tools that can bring justice upon you. But anyway, here she goes. She gets convicted. So basically, the judge has ordered her to wear an ankle monitor while she awaits her sentencing, right? She's been found guilty. She's going to wait sentence.
Yeah.
And her lawyers have made the case that wearing the ankle monitor will impede upon her burgeoning Pilates career. She's a Pilates teacher. And, you know, as a Pilates fan, I just loved this line of defense. And apparently Pilates is the only thing she has now. And it would be just cruel to deny her the opportunity to teach Pilates. Now, in fairness, you do need to put a strap around your ankle when you do reformer Pilates. I mean, she could just teach mat, but whatever, that's to one side. But I just found this hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Can you imagine any other person? Can you imagine Wiz Khalifa being like, yo, judge, or anyone else who's ever been through the justice system?
My Pilates, yeah, I know.
My Pilates! Oh my God. ASAP just being like, but Pilates is so important to me. Oh, Lord. Anyway, it just made me laugh.
What's interesting, actually, like, it is hilarious. And obviously the fact that her lawyer even had the temerity to even mention that is so funny. And the fact that they thought that could actually work tells you a lot about how we view different people in the criminal justice system. You know, imagine, you know what I'm saying, young Tyrone on trial for his life or whatever. And they're like, yeah, man, can he not wear an ankle monitor? Like, he's got Pilates. Like, get the hell out of here. But the interesting thing is actually the founder of Aussie Media. So if you recollect, there was a story about Carlos Watson, I believe his name is. I might have got his surname wrong, but he was a black founder of a media company called Aussie Media that turned out to be essentially also fugazi. He had fake users. He had fake metrics on his YouTube. He got on a Zoom call with a potential investor and got somebody in his team to impersonate a YouTube executive in order to kind of get the investment, and then was rumbled. So he actually was about a few days away from going to jail, and Trump commuted his sentence, meaning that he's just on probation now, basically. And Trump said somehow, like, he's not going to jail, basically. Then there was also the founder of Nikolai, which was an EV company, which was meant to be developing like EV vans. That turned out to be fugazi. He was going to jail for like 30 years. He apparently gave a $2 million donation to Trump, and now he's been pardoned. So there seems to be a switch where during the Trump administration, like, a certain form of crime is kind of legal now. Like, it used to be like, yo, they'll throw the book at you. You know what I'm saying? So watch out. Elizabeth Holmes might be next. If I'm Elizabeth Holmes people, I'm sending a $2 million donation to Trump's campaign right now, because you can buy your way out of this. What's your thoughts on these sort of founders who we've looked at as, you know, tragic stories of like what happens when greed gets in the way, and when you do the wrong thing, when you take it too far? And at one point it looked like they were facing the consequences, but now it looks like there's a price that can be paid, or there's a conversation that can be had with this administration, at least, where, you know what, it's not looked the same as, you know, it's not looked upon the same thing as like a regular crime anymore.
I just feel that having been in the startup game for however many years now, like I've been at a startup that went through IPO at Groupon, you know, sometimes the people get caught are just like the unlucky ones. They're not the only ones playing these tricks and playing these games. You know what I mean? Like when we were talking about tariffs at the beginning, I had this memory of having a call with a Groupon supplier who was literally in tears because he had ordered a container of products from China purely to do a Groupon deal. And because we had only just introduced new regulations that we were forced to through the Office of Fair Trading, because before that we were just doing whatever deals with whatever person, we could not go forward with his deal. And this guy was like, literally in tears, he's like, please, I've taken a loan out against my house. Like, I have like, 20,000, whatever pounds worth of stock. I need to ship it. And I was just like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, we can't run this deal. But I'm not trying to implicate anyone, right? This was like 10 plus years ago, and a lot of things
what are you saying here,
I was
Abadesi?
there,
What crimes have you
and
done?
a lot of things changed
What crimes
since.
have you done, Abadesi?
But
what
what
are we
I'm trying to
saying
say is, like, I've seen things, I've heard investors say things, I've heard founders say things, vanity metric ways to play the game, tweak the numbers, at certain points in the journey. I'm not saying that I have done these things. I'm not saying that I have endorsed these things.
Definitely not.
But it is a world where sometimes people willingly turn a blind eye to dodgy stuff in the name of the game. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like in football, where it's like you push someone. If the ref didn't see, you go on with the game. And I just feel like that happens in startup land as well. People know that there are whatever farms in India and other global south countries that are bumping up the user numbers, bumping up the engagement metrics. I mean, if you watch Silicon Valley, the HBO comedy, yes, it was a satire, but a lot of satire is grounded in reality. So 100%. I don't know. In a way, that's kind of why I feel that like Trump is letting some of these people off, because he's just like, I mean, I've done it, or I have friends who've done it. I mean, I don't know that, that's allegedly, but I think there's an element of like, he was the person that was like, I don't pay taxes. He said, I don't pay taxes. No one's come for me. So why am I going to pay
because
taxes,
I'm smart,
right?
That's what he said, because I'm smart.
So he sees, tricking the system, playing the game. And, I've read online that his family had links to Ku Klux Klan. They had links to organized crime, mafia, New York. He has a history. He has like a family legacy of operating outside the legal systems, outside formal structures.
He's a gangster.
Well,
he's a gangster.
Now you're making him sound cool. Now you're making him sound cool.
But I mean, in the sense that, like, I can't think of a better word to describe. If you're saying that he's got links with organized crime, allegedly, then, allegedly, one could say that, he moves with a certain gangsterism, in the sense that, like, the law is there, but the law is also, there to be maneuvered. The interesting thing is that the Hok coin, the Hok girl, who had the Hok coin, I never thought I would say that combination of phrases in my life. People thought she must be in trouble with the law, because essentially she did a pump and dump with her token. But essentially it looks like she's not going to be prosecuted for it, because the sitting president also has a meme coin that is a pump and dump scheme too, allegedly. And so does his wife, allegedly. So it's like, we can no longer prosecute people based on doing certain crimes, because allegedly it looks like the US sitting president allegedly is doing something similar. So this is where I think you're right, in the sense that these people are getting away with it because Trump probably understands, or his administration understands, that this is how we have got down historically, allegedly. Last time I'll say allegedly, I'm tired of saying that word, but I don't want to get sued. And I want to go to the US one day.
I think this is also where, like, it would be so interesting to get more of the cultural insight from within America. Because even though I'm American, I left the country when I was really young, and I only ever like go back in like short periods of time. And I've spent more time in the UK now. But I'm really curious what a broad range of, millennials, 30 somethings, 20 somethings, whatever, across America feel in response to that. Like in that, like, do they feel positive, negative, neutral about the fact that he's identifying certain people who are seeing themselves as operating outside the system, playing by their own set of rules, to financial gain? And they're not doing it solo, right? Because like, this is the thing when we talked about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, she was the one person that went down, but she wasn't the only person that knew, right? Okay, fine, her partner was also implicated, but there would have been dozens of people who knew something wasn't adding up. You do your due diligence as an investor, you see the spreadsheets as an employee. So I'm just very curious if people see, in a weird way, a sense of justice in this. I'm curious.
No, I think the buck stops with the founder. You're right. I'm sure there were other people involved. At the end of the day, if you want to be the CEO, that comes with responsibilities legally. And it also means that you're going to be the one on the magazine cover. So if something is going down at your company, with your awareness, the buck stops with you. I think it's a lesson for all founders listening to this podcast, that the temptation to, maybe fudge your numbers a little, tell your investors things are a bit more rosier than they actually are. Maybe, do some fugazi stuff like that. Listen, it can lead down a dark path, and Trump might not be there. There are consequences, and Trump might not be there to bail you out. So especially if you're kind of from if you're black and brown or woman, like, trust me, man, it ain't always going to work out for you.
And you can't on a more do Pilates with an ankle strap. So, you know what I'm saying? Don't forget that.
Yeah. So on a more positive note, I like this story. The founder of Topicals basically has acquired Bread Beauty Supply,
Nice.
which is a product
Whoop
for like
whoop.
textured hair care products. So these are two black-owned brands, two black women-owned brands who are working together. And Topicals, Olamide, is that how you say her name? I don't want to get that
Olamide.
incorrect. Olamide, there you go. That was terrible of me.
It's okay.
She is making boss moves. I love it because I think so often we look at black-owned brands and hope that they can be acquired, and more times than not, the acquisition is done by a larger, just generic corporation. So the fact that there are now black-owned brands in the position to acquire other brands, to consolidate, she's building a holding company to hold it. Great moves.
Very
Love
cool.
it. Very, very cool.
That's
Any thoughts on that, Abba?
Yeah, I remember like when I worked at Product Hunt, it was like a few years ago now, like seeing the pitch deck for Topicals and thinking about investing, but I was just too like cheap at the time. I was like planning my wedding and I was just like, I need to be careful with how I spend my coin right now. But it's been so exciting watching the rise of that brand. And I just love this idea because look, Carol's daughter just got bought back by the owner, right? After being acquired. Was it L'Oreal? Estee Lauder? I can't remember which big beauty brand bought them. But, you know, I was a Carol's daughter user, went into a big conglomerate, inevitably ingredients changed, wasn't as good a product, now been bought back by the original owner, which is such an amazing story, and hopefully will go back to its original level of efficacy and quality. And I think what's happening with this is, if I understand correctly from the press release, how do we avoid that happening? You know, how do we avoid these wonderfully crafted black-owned brands addressing these underserved markets in a unique way from being acquired by, let's face it, you know, majority white owned companies that will then change the recipe, change the ingredient, and then change the efficacy of the product. It's changing the spirit of the product and how it affects us and how it works on us. I think it's such a great idea to do this. Like, let's protect these brands for the community, and I'm here for it. It's exciting.
Okay, cool. That's been this week's episode of Techish, everyone. Catch us on @TechishPod on Instagram, on our YouTube. @TechishPod also, which is growing gangbusters.
Honestly,
leave a review if you're listening to this on audio. I know, it's amazing.
How many do we need before we get a shiny thing from YouTube?
We have a long way to go. Let's just say that. So if you're listening to us, please help us out to get a plaque. I want to show you a plaque one day, innit? Platinum plaques, baby, like Dr. Dre. But anyways, yeah, so @TechishPod on Instagram, YouTube, on your podcast app, leave a review, thumbs up, all that good jazz, and we will catch you next week. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.